Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I'm sitting down with Mark Andrew Witham, founder of basicincomeaction.org, and an advocate for universal basic income as a solution to the economic shifts we're seeing with AI as well as automation. In tech and cybersecurity, a lot of us are already reading about and feeling the pressure. Automation, LLMs, and intelligent systems are changing how we work faster than any of us expect. I wanted to bring Andrew in to talk about how UBI fits into this picture, not as a theory, but as a real response to what's happening in our industry and beyond. Now we've known each other since I want to say around 2010, Andrew. You were doing IT consulting back then, worked a lot with hardware, systems, networks, many moving programming, as well as project management. You even built your own blockchain and launched cryptocurrency. I remember our conversations were always highlighted, everything from tech to moral, as well as philosophical issues. Deep, very deep conversation that we had. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm looking forward to learning more about the basic income.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. It's nice to catch up with you again and have this opportunity to answer these questions around universal basic income and AI and automation. Thank you for having me, and it's good to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for joining, Mark. So I'm curious. So what triggered you to reach out and start talking about UBI again? Was it something specific happening in the tech world right now, or more about where society's heading?
Yeah, yeah, both. Uh, as you know, in our industry, AI, LLMs, are all the hot topic right now, and there's a lot of investment, billions of dollars going into this technology, and we know that this technology is poised to facilitate a lot of work that was traditionally done by people and could render them obsolete. And so, uh, this takes me back to universal basic income. And I'd gotten involved with universal basic income around 2009, shortly before you and I first met. And I'd been thinking about a lot of, human problems are related to wealth inequality and a lack of access to wealth. So I've been involved with the UBI movement since 2009, looking to educate the population about, the fact that we live in this society that has tremendous amount of wealth, but that it's not that the wealth is not equally shared amongst everybody. So not everybody is benefiting from it, and we're all shareholders in the economy. So there needs to be a tool mechanism to support that sharing of that wealth and that equality. So I've been involved with UBI for quite some time now, and I know a lot of the prominent leaders in that community. And but fast forward to getting back in the spotlight is that seeing this real urge and need from AI right now. And I'll give you a prime example. I'm currently working with revamping Basic Income Action's website, and I used to work with a guy, a good friend of mine from India, and we worked on various projects over the years. I don't profess to be the best programmer out there. I can program, but this friend of mine, he's like 10 times better than I am. But I've got my hands on since the spring. I've started using some of these AI models for coding, and what I can get done with, say, my friend who's a top-notch, he's a um, full stack developer. What would take like 10 months, I'm getting accomplished within weeks. And so just seeing that scale right there and knowing where the technology can replace jobs is spurred all the more the importance of this idea of universal basic income.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. And it's kind of pretty scary to think about, and I really appreciate you taking the initiative and gaining experience on this. I mean, it seems that you're very, very passionate about it. And speaking about AI, I've had my experiences with it too. Working with small firms and seeing analysts actually incorporate AI into their workflows to save time throughout the day. Um, I think that it's probably only going to get worse. You could even use, McDonald's as an example. I was reading a while back that I think in Europe, Andrew, they're implementing robotic arms and AI automation to actually. There's no employees in the restaurant at all. It's like a kiosk, and the kiosk basically shoots out a burger through a tray. And it's capitalism at its finest. People are going to try to essentially make as much money as possible and cut others out. It just happens as a result of it. So super important what you're doing, man. And as I mentioned, I'm really glad that you reach out to me and to talk about this. And I'm so glad that you're heavily involved in it. But with that said, I did have some interview questions for you, if that's all right.
Mhm.
First, before we get into AI, tell us simply what is universal basic income and why should we be paying attention to it?
Yeah, so universal basic income, it's the idea that as a society, we um, all deserve a right and access to wealth. So a basic income. It's that no one should fall below a certain threshold, and that threshold ought to be able to supply the basics: food, clothing, shelter, medical, all of the basic necessities. Not We're not talking about a Ferrari here. We're talking about basic. That's why it's called basic income, the income necessary for basic needs, so that nobody falls below a certain line. Here, particularly in the United States, there's a common understood in the basic income community of a threshold, and it's based upon the IRS's definition of a poverty line. And essentially, you're considered to be poor. I think it's don't quote me on this. It's something like under $1,200 a month. You're considered to be poor. So that threshold, if the IRS is considering you need to make this in order to have all your basic needs met, then that's the threshold that most in the UBI community can agree upon. And um, then the next part of UBI is work requirement. A lot of our social programs are tied around heavy governmental bureaucracy of things that require you to do X, Y, and Z in order to receive benefit. And the universal part, and some like to also say unconditional, is that there's no means testing. There's no work requirement. And that might get a little bit of pushback from some of the more conservative natures of rhetoric around, well, we all need to earn our living. And there's a counter to that argument, many counters to that argument within the UBI community, and the main one is that and I like to put it this way, particularly, I don't hear it too often, is that we are all shareholders of the economy. We all need money to participate in that, and um, uh, that as shareholders, we ought to receive some sort of dividend or some sort of return um, upon the wealth of what community and society that we live in produces. Um, so no work requirements. It's the most common thing most of us here in the United States particularly can adhere to understand this a little better would be Social Security. Um, Social Security originally, when it was being formed, uh, that every U.S. citizen was to receive a Social Security, and it was something that you wouldn't pay into. But it got watered down where you have to pay into it and you only get it at retirement or disability. Um, and so we almost got a truer form of Social Security back when it was originally being penned. So this would just be considering expanding upon that and bringing it back to its original pen. Uh, in my basic income action plan, there's something that lines to more towards like modern monetary theory, and it's the idea that money supply, we could just print out money and distribute directly from the Federal Reserves. It doesn't have to be a government expenditure item. Doesn't need taxes to cover it. So there's ways in which it can be quote funded. Um, so and the reason why we should be paying attention to that is just the reason why this topic was brought up is that we're seeing something new in the industrial revolution of AI and LLMs.
Thanks, Mark. Really appreciate that. Next question here. Some people hear UBI and immediately think socialism or unearned money. How do you respond to that when you hear remarks or statements like that, Andrew?
Yeah, that really gets to us that see it differently. Um, that if you start arguing to someone, say, let's bring up your point. Okay, well, where does capitalism come from? Look at the historical record of how that came about through the burgeoning middle class during the 1500s and Lockean principles of property and uh, taking away from the rights of others, which is property, and where wealth comes from. So it's kind of tied to property rights in a fundamental way, in that if you're denying somebody the rights of property, um, then they can't make their own bread in their own shelter. And so Locke himself stated that there ought to be a mechanism to provide for those that have been denied the rights of property. And that quintessential is exactly what UBI represents in our capitalistic world, is just your share of what you've been denied by what capitalism has um, uh, taken. And that's rights to property, that's rights to wealth. Um, so that would be the strong counter to the idea and notion that it's undeserved. It's deserved because you've been denied access. So and fundamentally, if you are to argue for capitalism and property, then you need to also, and if you're going to hold up Lockean as the prime founder of capitalism and the merchant class, then you need to also hold up his notion that something needs to be done about those that have been denied.
Awesome, Mark. Thank you. But I do have one big question for you. How do we pay for it?
Yeah,
That's
that's
it.
a big one there. That's a big one. So, uh, most people, when you talk about that I've come across with UBI is, well, I don't want my tax dollars. They think of traditional welfare programs, government spending bills need to be offset by taxes. Here in the United States, as you well know, that we run a deficit when it comes to government spending. Um, some would argument that we ought to make a fiscal policy, so a government policy, so make a bill. And I think it's in the neighborhood of 1.5 trillion to 3 trillion, if I recall, but those numbers aren't quite accurate because for every dollar spent in an economy, there's a cyclical return. So when you start talking about it'd be like $3 trillion a year to provide at that basic income level that I explained earlier, that the actual net comes down to like 1.5 trillion. Um, but I'm not, and there's ideas of there's been experiments done like in Finland that found that a UBI is actually works just as well as all the social programs that they were providing, just with less bureaucracy. So you could essentially argue in a conservative standpoint that UBI is less bureaucratic, and so there would be potential savings from a federal government standpoint. But one of the primary arguments, that's been come about over the years is this modern monetary theory is like the idea that the government can just print out money. So we're talking about monetary policy, the ability to essentially, just as we print out money and give it to central banks, we could print out money and give it right to the citizens, and use that as a tool that the revenue service has, to balance things like inflation and recessions and whatnot. Give it to them as a tool, and we did actually have that during COVID, when we got the COVID checks. That happened instantaneously. We got the money right away as citizens. So it's very streamlined. So if we could add it to monetary policy, it's less likely that politicians would interfere with something like that when it's guaranteed through monetary policy. So that would be the other way. There are other alternatives, like all the notions of where we're sending a lot of money to privatization, like nonprofits, and the U.S. relies heavily upon allowing nonprofits to facilitate social needs, and there's billions worth of savings there instead of sending it to nonprofits. I mean, that wealth could just go into like sovereign funds. And
I really appreciate that, Mark. The COVID-19 example with the stimulus checks was spot on, to your statements there. But critics say we be taken from those who earn and giving to those who don't. What's your take on that as well?
right there, it goes right back to that Lockean principle, fundamentals, which capitalism is founded upon. If you're going to argue that it's unearned, I'm going to argue that it was taken away. Um, so if you're denying the rights of somebody else, that they're not capable or able to participate in that capital, then it's theft. So it's kind of backwards to think about that. Like those that are able to participate are actually, extorting from those that can't participate.
Yeah,
So
interesting looking at it.
that would be the primary biggest argument. But mine also kinds of, I would bring in like a humanist perspective of a society coming together, and we came out of this feudalist need to be casted into uh, whatever we were born into, that's what we got. And the humanist perspective is that with education, services, that a human has the potential to go beyond what they were born into. And so that would kind of be my second argument about just what do human beings need to be their best and their fullest. And so um, uh, universal basic income makes sense when that's a floor that you just make sure nobody falls below. Um,
The
so
foundation.
from It's a good humanist perspective to think that that's uh, um, that it's not just education, not just healthcare, but there's a foundation that nobody falls below. And I think that's a very good humanist perspective, and recognizing that other people exist, and um, their well-being matters, their life matters, and so it's moral. I think it's a moral responsibility that we need to take on as fellow human beings on this planet.
Thank you, Mark. Or Andrew, sorry.
That's all right.
You mentioned before that you studied macroeconomics and something called modern monetary theory. Can you break down what that is and what it has to do with UBI?
Yeah, so just recently, a couple semesters ago, I took some macroeconomics. Through my life, I had a fondness for just how does money work? Where does money come from? Just gleaning here and there from readings and books and whatnot, and uh, just thinking about currency and how we use it in society, and how it seemed like there was a common denominator to a lot of human suffering is tied to the lacking of currency that doesn't allow for, and I learned through macroeconomics about labor mobility, words like labor mobility. So UBI, if you
I
think
know
about it,
it means
yeah, labor mobility. Think about if you get an education to an somebody who's in economics, they would call that labor flexibility. When you have an education, it allows you to be flexible with your career. You're no longer stuck in something that requires maybe just general labor or some hands-on skill. So education gives you flexibility, and UBI gives you mobility. Allows so a lot of people are static; they're stuck between uh, something bad and something worse, having to make decisions with that. Maybe they're stuck in a room and they need to get a better living situation or move across the country. And so UBI helps facilitate that because it's for your basic needs, place to live. And we could get talking into like, well, rent control and that type of stuff. So, um, from an economic standpoint, thinking about what UBI is mobility, labor mobility, and if it's supplying enough for education, it's also it's an avenue for flexibility, labor flexibility. So you mentioned modern monetary theory. That's something that started entering my world, I'd say about 4 or 5 years ago. Um, and um, I also saw it posted on by some fellow UBI advocates as well, a prominent figure out there, and um, uh, it really aligned to my idea notion of our money supply. And this idea that, and I had mentioned this before, is the theory is that we can print money. Now we got to be careful with that, with hyperinflation and everything. But the idea is that um, budgets are kind of abstract. It doesn't require taxes. So the theory is you don't need taxes to offset budgets. So therefore, there's nothing really saying that, it's your taxes that are paying for a UBI. So if someone says, well, socialism, um, uh, in one of your prior questions, I would argue with modern monetary theory is that no, you don't, it's not your taxes that are paying for it. We just have to decide from a fiscal standpoint that it's something we need in the budget and print the money for it. So that's the theory behind that. It's not the prior one that well, I forget the guy's name. He's a prominent figure too. Um, but a lot of what our economics is based upon uh, has the idea that budgets need to be offset by taxes, and modern monetary theory says that's not true.
Gotcha. Before we move on to AI, Andrew, I have one question for you. Those that are kind of opposed to, this system of UBI and favor capitalism, and the ones that are trying, obviously, to, make as much as possible. What do you think fuels somebody to, you know, harness the monetary system that way, to have that need to where they need to make, tons of money to survive or to live or to be happy. What do you think fuels that? Because I feel like those are some of the types of people that may be opposed to it.
Yeah, there's it's kind of a mixed bag. There are those including my unfavorite trillionaire now, Elon Musk. Um uh you know we talk about what is earned, and philosophically $1 trillion is not earned. Um but um So there are those that have wealth, and they would say a UBI makes sense, and have stated that publicly. Now, to what they do beyond that is unseen, unrealized right yet. One of the co-founders of Facebook, Chris Hughes, um, uh, when he stepped away from Facebook, he said, he was living with the daily notion that, he didn't create all of this. He didn't feel like he earned it.
Got you.
And so he took a moral decision himself to step away. And then he started a foundation, a fund to, help UBI along. So there are
Awesome.
individuals who are, recognizing and seeing it. But I think it comes down to education and grassroots effort of getting the everyday average person to understand the arguments and the reasoning behind why UBI makes sense. And I think a lot of times it seems like we don't really move until there's pressure to move or do something about it. And I believe we're hitting that wall right now with AI and LLMs and
I think
um,
it's going to come to light more, but so Andrew, I think maybe I'm just thinking out loud here. The life experiences probably have a lot to do with one's perspective on it too. What I went through when I was younger, somebody else may not have gone through and may not see it the same way as somebody who may have been on the lesser side of things.
yeah, and that's a very good response to convincing somebody about this idea. If you've ever experienced job loss or um, food insecurity or home insecurity, you're probably going to be more say, yeah, I agree with this, but that doesn't help the argument. I think you're right. It's about reaching those individuals that haven't experienced um, those things, who may have had a little bit more success in life.
Or found
Uh, yeah, I think the big notion is this idea that here in the United States in particular is that w when somebody is poor or struggling in life, we say that there's something wrong with that individual. It's something that they did. But then on the flip side of that is that when somebody makes wealth in our society, we attribute it, you know, to the um, to the individual, that it was all because of them. But they wouldn't have wealth without society.
exactly.
So I would argue to say that if you can educate to get people to realize that if they were in a box all by themselves, they wouldn't have wealth. And the ego attributing all of their success because of something that they did, I'd try to argue to say that no, it's, you may have been lucky, or you were just at the right place, right time, required people to buy your products or your services, and so fundamentally, I think it comes down to education and grassroots efforts of educating everyone around you that we need this. This is something that we're missing in our society, that relies upon uh, how wealth and success is attributed and where it comes from.
Thank you, Andrew. So let's talk about AI a little bit more. So I'm curious what you read on where things are heading with AI. Do you think AI is really going to take over and replace a lot of jobs? Feels like it's moving faster than anybody expected. I remember when AI was introduced publicly, it felt like it came out of nowhere, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things that just it feels like a singularity just happened all at once. Um, for those like yourself and myself, you know, we see advancements in technology like a wall in front of us. It's happening like right now. It's right there in front of us. I think for everybody in society, it's a bit slower. It seems like it's just graduating at a certain pace. You might not see the signs here and there, but you're hearing stuff. Maybe you know somebody who got laid off. You're hearing it more and more in the media. Some of the negative things about artist creations being stolen, being used as material. Uh, um, and the whole argument that the AI is not going to doesn't get it right. It makes misdiagnoses and health decisions and things like that. But you and I know in tech, those are just small little things that need to be tweaked with the software, the neural networks and stuff. They will just go in there with tweezers and snip out the things that we don't like and um, build 1,000 more models and then see which ones come out best and use those ones and get rid of the rest. And it just keeps on going on and on. But then we start making machines that work with machines to do that. And then you start getting into the exponential, the heavy investment into quantum computing is just going to only get better and better. And unfortunately, capitalism is driven. Someone's going to do it at the expense of others and at the expense of nature. Um, so I think the idea is to not push against. Personally, I wouldn't push against the technology because I just don't think. Well, we don't have the political environment that's going to address it. I think it's foolhardy to think that. I mean, we got other political things going on right now, but um, so I think the idea is to see that it's happening and it's going to continue to happen. I do worry sometimes that it looks like it could be a bubble. There's a lot of the AI startups that are around are not producing a return on investment. And there's been some projections that there's 95 to 98% of them are going to fail because there's no return on investment. Um, I think it's just going to get more and more integrated into everything. Um, and people who have braced it and are using it are, it's kind of one of those like evolve or die type of things.
Yeah.
And it was happened when COVID shut everything down. Like I'll use restaurants as an example. Um, a lot of restaurants that started doing things like DoorDash and facilitating eat out through uh, like Uber Eats and whatnot made it. Ones that held on to the tradition didn't make it. And it's unfortunate to think about the technology in this way too. But my biggest concern is that it's going to happen too quick, too fast. In the current political climate, people are going to blame others. They're not going to blame the lack of government response to the joblessness. I think it's just going to take more time for jobs to return. There'll be more unemployment because of it, because it'll be more exponential. So it's a new time in history, and it's hard to predict. There are a lot of smarter individuals than I am that are in this topic. Um, uh, I actually embrace it. I hope there's a utopian where I don't have to have a job anymore. I don't mind working. I just don't want a job. I want the promise of automation. Um, uh, but we can't deny the human factor. That's at the cost of capitalism, and that's the biggest argument that I have against automation in these AIs is that somebody's livelihood is going to be replaced, and the blindness that um, you know people who manage corporations and technology, those tech bros and their rhetoric and everything like that. That's very bothersome.
I feel like a lot of the individuals that may be replaced by AI as well are probably some of the most intelligent ones. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
usage
I agree with that.
the higher ones on the chain. They're very intelligent too, but the ones and the analysts and the ones doing kind of the grunt work and stuff like that are unfortunately are going to be the ones that, as we're seeing, are the ones that are kind of suffering from it a little bit.
Yeah, you just have to go on to LinkedIn and you have to look at I mean, it's a cesspool there, in my opinion, from uh, thinking about uh this hyper um capitalistic you know way to present yourself and move up the ladder and yeah, I think the real people that are actually doing the real work in society are taking the biggest hit, and it's unfortunate.
So lastly, I know we're limited on time a little bit here, Andrew. So how does this all tie back to UBI? How does automation make the idea more urgent or more possible?
Well, uh, I would say that, just the sense that it's coming up in our awareness, the very fact that we're having this conversation, very reasons why, I feel compelled to come forward, come out of the woodworks in a sense. And this is something new. This is something big, and we need to take action upon it. Um, so UBI is not going to happen unless we, the people, demand it. Um, and uh, let's use AI to spread the message. Let's use the tool that's taking our jobs, that's taking our work. Let's utilize it to build better systems, write better policy, counter the rhetoric that's out there. Um, the other side that's going to argue against all of it is going to use it. So I would say embrace it and use it for good. Um,
It's like a red
uh,
team, blue team AI
yeah,
battles.
and yeah, it's like uh, and a lot of times to a short of a revolution, which I don't particularly like the idea of revolutions, is you got to use the system to overcome the system. And that's what I'm talking about is just what I'm doing with AI right now and universal with the website Basic Income Action is within 4 weeks, I've built an MVP, a minimum viable product that I'll be launching pretty soon.
It's awesome.
And I haven't been spending all day on it. I just been plugging away with it over the 4 weeks. So it'll be phenomenal just to see the end result. Again, you have to know coding, you have to know technology to really be building a stellar product. You can't just blindly accept results that are given to you. It's good to have that skepticism and um, understanding of the fundamentals when it comes to building tech. So um, yeah, that would be my take on um, AI and utilizing it. It's inevitable. Um, I don't see it going away, and the importance of universal basic income is going to become more and more prevalent. So we have to understand the arguments and um, uh, fight for that change, implement the change.
Andrew, if people want to learn more or get involved, where can they find you or basicincomeaction.org? I believe that's the website.
Yeah, so basicincomeaction.org. The site is a static site right now. It's about a couple years old, and I'm working on revamping it, and we'll be launching pretty soon. But it still has relevant information there. There's plenty of prominent figures out there in the UBI community. I would say Scott Santons. He's been a an individual who's is a vast resource when it comes to all the things that we talked about today when it comes to universal basic income. Um, I can personally be reached on BlueSky Social.
Okay.
That's where I prominently spend uh, most of my time posting about my work and what I'm doing. And that's at Puff Mushroom, PuffMushroom .bluesky.social. So I can be found there primarily. Um, uh, you could reach out through the website, but I'm predominantly on BlueSky Social.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, when I post it, I'll be sure to include that in the text as well, so everybody can grab it if that's okay, Andrew.
Yeah, very good.